Hello and welcome to today's video. This time we're going to be taking a look at some of the very scarcest vintage Penguin books. These ones published often exclusively for the armed forces during the Second World War. Now these are incredibly sought after and valuable. Sometimes only single copies are known to exist. They're often unique and absolutely fascinating to look at if you collect vintage Penguin books. So sit back, relax, and let's get to it. So the first series we'll look at is the Forces Book Club. Now this was launched in 1942 and it wasn't a Penguin series per se, such as say the King Penguins or the Pelicans or the Specials, but these were an amalgam of the entire Penguin list that was selected by a committee from the Penguin books that had already been published or were in the process of being published by Penguin and then sent out to units of the armed forces around the globe. This particular venture demonstrated Penguin's desire to meet the needs of the armed services in the field. The intention was for the War Office to supply 60 tons of paper to Penguin books each month to enable the production of the package of 10 titles, each with a print run of 75,000 books. Now, the books were supplied to the units for an annual subscription of £3. The venture was supported by the Service's Central Book Depot, which handled the subscriptions, and also by the Army Bureau of Current Affairs, whose director, W.E. Williams, also happened to be one of Penguin's original editors on the Pelican series. Now in reality, this series never really took off, and between 7,000 and 10,000 sets at most were ever published. Alan Lane never got his promised paper quota, and all the unsold copies were rebound and used as the basis for the prisoner of war issues. Books bore the number of the month, numbers 1 to 12 on the spine, so that all 10 books issued for that particular month had the same number and bore the same colour. Now in putting this video together, I've been assisted by Penguin collector David Edwards. Now David is one of the most comprehensive collections of wartime Penguin books in existence and has kindly supplied me with some amazing photos from his collection. I shall show you these alongside some video of my own books. So on the screen now you can see the very first Forces Book Club that I got many years ago, and I only paid a few pounds for. I think it was a £5. It was the Chinese, and I thought, what on earth is this? I'd never even seen them before, but I was over the moon to get that little curiosity, and since then I've picked up a few over the years. Not many, but a few. And I've also got a couple which are actually Forces Book Club issues, but not your regular Forces Book Club. So they were copies that were first released in the Forces Book Club, but they've been bound into these hardbacks, and this was probably done during the war, and they are the, as you can see down below, the Forces Book Club issue of that particular book. But a bit like what we'll see later on with the Prisoner of War books, they've had the Forces Book Club covers removed, and they've been put into these sort of standalone hardbacks, which in themselves are really fascinating and almost certainly unique publications. Very interesting indeed. David says that he's managed to amass a collection of 74 titles from the 120 that were printed in this format. There is no complete set in existence, and he says his collection is probably in the top 3 or 4 outside of library collections. I'd say it was probably the first or second best in existence, to be honest, David. So here's the list of titles on the left, with an example of each month's colour on the right. And I really like the unusual colours that they've used on these. It's a bit of a change from the main series, and they are quite bold and bright. Certainly when the books are in top condition, they just look fantastic, and they're just so unusual. They're like nothing that you've ever seen before if you're a Penguin book collector, but just so difficult to find, and I can well believe that there is no complete set in existence. Penguin themselves don't seem to own many, if any, and there's none in existence in the British Museum in London. Very scarce, and definitely worth keeping your eyes peeled for. Now, with this particular one, it's a genuinely unique book, and it's the Forces Book Club edition of Britain BC, which was previously held in a prisoner of war camp library. Now, the card covers have protected the original covers beneath, and it's in great shape. It's covered in stamps from the German censors, and the numbers of the prisoners that borrowed it from the library have written on it. A wonderful piece of history. What Happened in History is the first Forces Book Club title that I bought. I don't remember exactly when, but it was around 25 years ago at a Penguin Collectors Society event at the Wandsworth Museum, and I believe I actually went to that particular show as well. He says he paid £4 for it, and he's never seen another copy since then. Like all the wartime titles, the crime books rule the rare roost. So these are his Forces Book Club crime titles, and they really are very scarce. So David says, the Forces Book Club edition of Brighton Rock is very special to me. It's one of my favourite books, and it had been top of my wants list forever. I genuinely never thought I'd see a copy, let alone own one, and when it came up on eBay, I could think about little else until the auction finished. Prisoner of War editions. In addition to the Forces Book Club, which was intended for those in serving units, Penguin Books decided to produce and dispatch books to service personnel held as prisoners of war. For 3 guineas a year, an individual could receive a monthly parcel containing a selection of 10 books, very much like the Forces Book Club process. Very few copies of these books have survived, and there is no complete list. The books selected had to pass both the British censors, who vetted them to ensure that no vital information was inadvertently passed to the enemy, and the German security staff, to check that the contents did not aid escape or subversion. They were usually delivered as part of the Red Cross parcel system. The books were made in standard Penguin format, and details of the prisoner of war book service were included inside. These were, on the whole, rebound, unsold Forces Book Club editions that had been trimmed slightly with new covers. How many titles exist, or how many survive today in collections, is anybody's guess. Here are the 4 crime titles that David has in Prisoner of War edition. These are all rebound Forces Book Club editions, and they all reference the Forces Book Club inside, and have been rebound and trimmed. He says they've never been near a prisoner of war camp, of course. Services editions. So this series of books was started towards the end of the war in the second half of 1945. These were all current books printed in 1945 and then also produced for the armed services. They were rebound in slightly altered covers with a narrow stripe on the spine and in the central box of the cover above the words Services Edition. 15 titles were produced, though the last number is SE 18, as numbers SE 14, 16 and 17 were not used. The final 3 books, SE 13, 15 and 18, were printed in 1945, and it would appear that they were issued as services editions ahead of publication to the public in January 1946. Distribution of the books was handled by a government department, the Services Central Book Depot, and this agency also received services editions of books from other publishers. A few of the services editions were bound in standard covers, but have the services edition publication date behind the title page. These included numbers 500, 506 and 508. David says this about his copy of The Mystery of Orcival, the services edition. He says, I love this copy for its condition and for the perfect Central Services Book Depot stamp on the front cover. I have most of the services editions, although I'm yet to find Calls for Alarm by Eric Ambler, and this is the other crime title from the series, which is very, very scarce. So lastly, we'll look at the Egyptian editions. So David says the Egyptian editions are fascinating, as I'm sure you know. They were printed locally and aren't quite right in typeface or design. Up until a few years ago, it was thought that there were 21 titles in this format based on advertisements and listings on the books, and these included the French language title De Montmartre à Tripoli and The Penguin You Write in number 13. It was also known that at least 2 or 3 of these titles existed in identical format but for sale in Palestine with Palestinian pricing. It's now thought that The Penguin You Writing was never printed in the Egyptian series, but 2 other titles certainly were, The Nursing Home Murder and A Passage to India. It's also now commonly agreed that it's likely that all the titles exist in a Palestinian variant too. David says he has all the others as well, except Death of a Ghost. And these are the 6 titles David has as Palestinian editions. So thanks very much for David for sharing his collection. I do hope that that's been educational and given you some background about these scarce wartime Penguin Forces editions. Definitely worth picking up if you see them. If you have enjoyed today's video, do please hit the like button and do consider subscribing for regular Penguin book content. Thanks for watching today, and I'll see you soon with another video. Bye.